Hey friends, so today I'm going to do this video a little bit differently. You're just going to watch me while I make an order of pure pots for a plant company. So first, of course, I need to weigh out the clay. I made these a bunch of times before, so I know I need to use 1.6 kilo. And I actually like to combine two different clays to make these pieces. I'm combining a speckled clay and a white clay. This is just because I think the speckled clay is a little too much and the white clay is just a little too little. You want to wedge them pretty well so that they're fully combined and you don't end up with a marbling effect. And I like to do spiral wedging on larger pieces of clay. When it's smaller and it can fit into my hands easier, I'll do ram's head. But I've got pretty small hands, so ram's head is not so easy for me to do on these larger pieces, so I just do a spiral wedge. And then I just make them into these little cones in the end so I can easily attach them to the wheel. So I always just add a little bit of water to the wheel head before I attach my clay. And then centering with these ones, I just take my time. I'm not super good at making really big pieces of ceramics, so I don't have a lot of experience centering big pieces of clay on the wheel. At least for me, this is a big piece of clay. But I just take my time with it. I'm going to do some coning to help get it centered, because coning helps you to kind of center each individual piece at once and not the whole thing at once when you're just doing a regular centering. So I'll just bring it up and down 2 or 3 times until it's centered. And when it's centered, I'll just bring it back down again so I can make my hole. I'm always checking the bottom of these with my needle tool. So I just stick the needle tool straight through the bottom of the pot, slide my finger up until my finger's on the bottom of the pot, and then I can pull it out and see how much space is between the wheel head and my finger, so the depth of the bottom. And because I'm making some custom pieces throughout this project, I'm going to be measuring a lot so I can get them all more or less the same size. And they also need to have a specific plant insert that will sit inside of them, so I need them to fit correctly. So you'll notice during the first couple of pulls I'm using my fingertips, and then at some point I switch over to my knuckles. And that's because I like to use my fingertips during most of my pulling, but only when my hands can be connected. So when I'm using my fingertips, I always keep my thumbs connected throughout the whole pull. But at some point the cylinder becomes so tall that my thumbs can no longer reach each other. And in that case, I switch over to my knuckle. I just find it more stable somehow. If you can't rely on the hands to stabilize each other, somehow the knuckle feels a bit more stable. However, this pull takes me a bit longer, I guess partly because I'm not used to throwing very much with my knuckle, but also I find that it dries out the clay more somehow. I'm not really sure why that is, but I keep having to stop and add some water at this point. And I'm using my ruler to make sure it's the right height and right diameter. And then I'll just remove the extra little bit of clay with my wooden knife here. And then I'll rib the walls to make them a nicer curve. I find it really helpful to use a mirror at this point so you can more easily see the curve of your pot. And each time you rib, you want to add a little bit of water to the sides of your pot. So I'm just pushing from the inside out I'm pushing the wall out to meet the rib, and the rib is shaping it. And then I'll add a little bit of newspaper on the top. This is a great trick that I learned from my friend. If you're not using bats and you're making very large pieces or thin pieces or wet pieces or anything that might wobble as you take it off, if you stick some newspaper to the top, it's going to keep that round shape as you transfer it from the wheel onto your board. So I wet my wheel a little bit, and now I'm just sticking it to the wheel to grab some suction, and I'm gonna go ahead and center it. When I'm centering, I'm turning it on the wheel a little bit and just trying to feel for that point where it's off center, and then I just move it into the center. This usually just takes 2 or 3 times. And then I'll use some extra clay to stick it down. After trimming, I always go ahead and rib the trimmed parts a little bit with a wet rib. This helps burnish out any trimming lines and also any grog that may have come up, and also just leaves a really nice, silky, smooth finish. Sorry for the ambulance in the background. We have our studio on a very busy street. So here I'm making the noses. So first I take a tapered lug and I'm going to start shaping it. So I like to roll it against my wedging board, and then I'll take a little bit of water on my fingertips and I'm kind of like pinching it into a triangle shape as I'm smoothing it out. It's sort of like pulling a handle, but not really. This is just a weird way of doing it that I figured out works well for me. And then it's just the classic slipping and scoring. I'll mark where it should sit with the needle tool. I have these great scoring tools to score the pot and to score the nose, and then I just use a little bit of water to attach them together. And then a lot of time is spent just fiddling with it, trying to make it stuck. I don't want the nose to look like it's stuck on the pot. I want it to look like it's really growing out of the pot and properly attached to the face of the pot. But I'm not going to worry about making it perfect just yet. First, I'm going to wrap it in plastic and let it sit for 24 hours so that the clay can kind of equalize in moisture level and the nose can really get stuck to the pot. I do this anytime I'm attaching any two pieces together, like a handle, for example. I always like to let them sit for 24 hours wrapped under plastic before I start letting them dry out. I find that this really helps with preventing cracks, and I had no cracks in this batch, so I'm quite pleased to say it works. So next I'm just going to smooth a little bit more, try and make that nose look as natural as possible. And then I use an old drill bit to carve out the eyes. Lastly, I'll put my signature on the pot and then they're ready to dry. Once they're fully dried out, I'm going to load them into my electric kiln. I like to stack these opening to opening to save space in the kiln. So the kiln always takes 2 days for us, and once the temperature is below 100 degrees, we can open it up. So first thing I'm going to do is clean up any sharp bits with some sanding paper. I always check the eyes and the signature because that's usually where I need to sand, but I'll run my hands over the whole of the piece and see if there's anything sticking up. So this commission was to put on blue cobalt cheeks onto these pots. So first I'm just using a template to draw the circle in a pencil. Pro tip, the pencil will burn off in the kiln, so you don't need to worry about leaving that behind. And then I'm just mixing some cobalt oxide with water. So I'm just pouring exactly how much I need. And a tiny bit of water. And mixing it together with my paintbrush. And then you just paint it on. I mean, painting with oxide is not really the same as painting with paint or engobe or underlays. I mean, it's a little bit like painting with wet sand. It's not very viscous, but you get the hang of it after a while, and it's not too hard. Once the oxide is dry, which really just takes a few minutes, they're ready to go into the glaze. So I'm using a white glaze on these, and then the cobalt will combine with the white where the cheeks are, and it will turn like this amazing blue. So normally I would apply glaze to this pot with some tongs. I would just do it all in one go, in one dip. But I didn't check my glaze level before I started this commission, and I really wanted to get this done in time, so I just had to work with a half-filled bucket, which meant a little bit more work for me. I had to do the glazing of this one in 3 steps. Luckily, sloppy glazing doesn't bother me. I think that it actually adds depth to the piece, at least with this beautiful white glaze that I'm using. So I'm not too worried about any extra drips. I'm just going to leave them as they are. I don't apply wax to my pieces. I personally think it's a waste of time to wax the bottoms, so I just go ahead and with a sponge just remove the extra glaze. And if you're just glazing with one color, you can actually recycle the glaze water back into the glaze itself, so you're not wasting the glaze there. And as always, when you're done glazing, you want to clean up with a wet sponge. So I'm putting my pots back into the electric kiln now for the final fire. This process will take another 2 days. I'll fire these pots to the final temperature of 1250 degrees Celsius. And yeah, after 2 days, again, once the temperature reaches down again below 100, I can open it up. And I'm so pleased with how this batch turned out. When I'm making orders, I usually make a couple of extra in case there's any cracks or anything goes wrong in the kiln. And absolutely every piece just turned out fine this round, so I'm super happy about that. You can see that I didn't only have the white pots with blue cheeks, they also asked for no glaze with pink cheeks, and then some freckles, and also some with no details added. So this plant shop will have quite a variety to serve their plant customers. I hope that was a helpful tutorial for you. I hope that you like this new format. Let me know down below. If you have any questions, you can just write them down below, or you can message me on Instagram at Pottery to the People. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next video. Bye, friends!